if you work with people and try to cooperate and try to collaborate, when the chips are down, they'll have your back. And I think that's something people have to learn in my industry. You can't always be a hard nose. You got to compromise.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. So today I have on Rick Hawley, and he is a VP and claims specialist at Willis, which is a really large brokerage, insurance brokerage. And Rick is awesome. I had a long conversation with him, a week or so ago, and I found myself after 45 minutes, an hour, I just said, you know what, I really want you to come on the podcast because he's been in insurance for 40 years and just has had an amazing career path and has seen and heard it all. So I wanted to have him come on and talk about it. So we'll bring him on in. Good morning, Rick. Welcome to this episode of Defense Never Rests. I'm so excited to have you on today. And our format today is a little bit different because we're here just to talk about you.
Oh, okay. That should be easy. I didn't have to study then.
No, you don't need to study at all. And just for our listeners, Rick and I had a telephone call not so long ago, probably about a week ago. And about 45 minutes in, I was just like, can you just come on the podcast and talk about your life? And he graciously accepted. So he's here today to do just that.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Megan. I appreciate your asking me to do this.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. So we'll just start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, which is Nassau County, which is the western part of Long Island, New York. And it was interesting. I was born in Freeport, Long Island, and my dad passed away when I was 3. And my mom was a single mom and was looking for a home for us to live in. And Levittown at that time, it was, I guess, established in the 40s for returning war veterans. So the houses were very reasonable. And it's interesting, she paid $13,800 for our house. You can't get a car for that now. So I grew up in Levittown pretty much my whole life from I'd say age 4 or 5 till the time I actually left home to start a career.
And well, so you left home to start a career. Did you jump right into your career? Did you stop on your way to college and stuff?
I went to college and I don't think anybody really plans on going into insurance. I think it just sort of finds you somehow. So my goal was to either work for a radio station or a newspaper. So I was a communications journalism major. Graduated from Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, with a bachelor's degree. And then kind of wasn't sure what I wanted to do because I didn't really want to work in some radio station in Montana, to pay my dues. And that's sort of what you had to do. So I worked for an engineering firm for a couple of years. And it was just too cut and dried for me. I like more of the abstract stuff. So I did okay. I was good in math and that kind of stuff. But this wasn't what I wanted to do. So I had a headhunter, employment counselor looking for jobs. And he called me up one day and he said, with your skills from communications, you'd be like a really good claim person. And I always thought of a claim person as like an auto appraiser. Mm-hmm. So I said, I don't do auto. I don't know anything about cars other than you turn the key and hopefully it starts. And he goes, no. And he explained to me what the job was and doing investigation and, how a bodily injury claim person would operate. So I said, what the heck? I don't really like the engineering job. I'm going to try it. I'll do it for a year or so. And by then I'll find a real job. At the end of this month, January 2021, it will be 40 years that I've been doing claims.
Yeah. And so this is precisely why I wanted you on, because I think, you've been in claims your entire career and you've probably seen it all. And I'm sure you have amazing stories to tell, and you've just watched the industry grow and change and go through high points and low points. And, I'm really interested just to dig into like your experiences throughout those 40 years and how it's changed in your eyes.
Yeah, no, believe me, you're right. You see all these different cycles over 40 years. I'll give you an example. When I started with Liberty Mutual, which was in January of 1981, I was hired as a road adjuster to handle bodily injury claims. And Liberty's philosophy at that time was you could not work for another insurance company. So even if I had like a month at Allstate, they wouldn't have hired me.
That seems like a harsh non-compete.
Yeah, it's very unusual. You were not allowed to go to law school because I guess they lost too many people who would do the claims, get their law degree, and then say, "Oh, see ya," and leave. So at that time, it's changed since then. So I was a road adjuster. So they gave me 7 weeks of training, which you don't see in the industry anymore. 3 weeks of classroom training of all lines. Although I was a liability adjuster, still learned a little bit about comp and property. They give you all that training. And then the last 4 weeks, they actually gave you your caseload, or gradually. And you reported to a training supervisor as opposed to your real manager in the office. And then you would go back each day and the training supervisor would say, "Oh, you did this right," or "You could have done this better." And you were not allowed, once you did go into your office after the 7 weeks, you were not allowed in the office more than 1 day a week. So Liberty said, "We don't care what you're doing, but you don't come in the office except your assigned day, say Thursday." And so you were on the road constantly. And now, if you talk to people in the industry, very rare to have people out on the road. Everybody's in an office.
Well, and especially now, well, there's a few things that I thought of when you're talking about that, but especially now that the concept of having like a road adjuster like that is totally not happening. Now everything's just done on your app on your phone. You take the pictures yourself, you load them up, you send them in. And I think there's some insurance companies that don't do it that way, but I think that's more the norm now. But what I caught on to is that training model. Did you find that training model was beneficial because you really had the opportunity to really learn everything and learn it correctly rather than almost getting thrown into the wolves, so to speak?
I think the training is very valuable, especially at that time where they didn't want you to have prior experience. So it wasn't like I came in and had some knowledge of how claims worked or what I needed to do. And a lot of it's common sense. It really is. Once you start to get into it, you say, okay, that kind of makes sense as to what we're trying to do and how we evaluate claims and things like that. But I found it to be very helpful. And I'll be honest with you, I found being on the road to be extremely helpful because you saw a lot of things firsthand. And you miss some of that doing it from a desk or doing it from a computer. I think your interactions with people were more fruitful as far as getting information, evaluating how seriously injured they were or were not. It was just a lot. You just learned a lot. Like, for instance, if you drove up to somebody's house, because you're insured, you would make appointments. Claimants, you would cold call. And the theory, to be totally honest, is they wanted you to get to these claimants before an attorney did and try to deal directly with a claimant. And so you would go to somebody's house. If they're out mowing the lawn and doing heavy work around their yard, it's going to be hard for them to say to you when you talk to them, "Oh yeah, I'm really hurt, I can't do anything." So there was some advantage to that, but there are inefficiencies also. I mean, I could drive an hour somewhere to cold call a claimant, and if they're not home,
right,
I've wasted an hour.
Yeah.
But so that, like anything, there's pros and cons with it.
Well, and I also feel like that even from speaking with your own insureds, if you're there, you're talking to them, you're looking at the car, and they're able to explain to you face to face and describe how the accident occurred. I think a lot more comes through in person. It's just like in depositions. We keep talking about now moving forward with depositions in a Zoom kind of world. And while I believe there is some benefit to having Zoom, and for some depositions it works fine. But if you're, say, deposing your plaintiff, I think that if something gets lost virtually, that you want to be there in the room because you can read a little bit more about a person when you're right there. And I think the same goes when you're talking to an insured about how the accident happens, and you create a little bit more of a relationship if you're talking face to face.
I agree. And especially when you're trying to evaluate a claim, the personalities involved, even though in a perfect world would have nothing to do with the facts of the case, as you know, from doing depositions and evaluating witnesses, it plays a big role in how a case can be decided. So I might sit with a claimant and go, oh, this guy is just totally unbelievable. I don't think anybody would ever buy this story. Or many times I'd say, wow, I really like this person.
Yeah.
And they really do seem to have been severely impacted by this accident. We got to do right by this person. So I found it to be valuable. That was sort of sink or swim out in the field. They did give you that training, but then it was sort of, you go out in the field and you were allowed to call in 3 times a day. Morning, around lunchtime, and then toward the end of the day to get assignments and to just check in with your training supervisor. And again, we're talking 40 years ago.
Yeah, I was like, how are you calling in? Are you calling on a payphone?
Exactly. And it would be funny because Liberty said, under no circumstances can you use the phone of an insured, whether it's a business or a person. Yeah, I understand that. So I'd be in the middle of some suburban neighborhood or some rural neighborhood, because I had Suffolk County, Long Island. Even though I grew up in Nassau, I had Suffolk, which is a very big county and quite rural in many areas, at least back then. And I'm in the neighborhood and I'm like, where the heck am I going to find a payphone around here? And so then you'd be driving around, you'd see one, you'd go up and of course, the wire would be cut, it would be vandalized, something like that. So yeah, that was pre-cell phone. That made it tough. And we didn't have GPS or MapQuest. This is foreign to some people. We had a Hagstrom map, which was this big atlas of road maps. And so you'd be out there and I'd say, oh, okay, Main Street in whatever. Oh yeah, okay, that's easy to get to. And I'd be, I get there and all of a sudden I get, oh, it's one way going the opposite way. Or one time I went down a street and the map didn't tell us that there was a railroad trestle that went through the middle of the street. And I'm like, there's no way I'm climbing that railroad trestle with my little, Ford Fairmont. That's happening. So it was an adventure, but it was fun.
It's funny you mentioned the map because when I was 16 or 17 and my parents got me a car where they did make sure that I had a map. I think I had a map of the state of Connecticut and I think of like the Northeast to be able to, because again, it was pre MapQuest or Google Maps or whatever it was. And it is a skill you need to know to learn to read a map. You still need it.
Well, helpful hint that I used on the road when the Hagstrom map wasn't doing it for me. So if the GPS ever, you have no signal and you can't get anything, I would look for a mail carrier. Mm-hmm. You know the neighborhood better than anybody. So I'd pull up and I'd say, hey, listen, I'm trying to find this address. Oh yeah, I know where that is. And they'd give you like the shortcut to it and everything. So if all else fails, look for a postal worker.
Yeah. That is a good tip, I think, even today.
Yeah, just in case you're in an area where there's no signal or like, oh, I left my phone at home or whatever it might be.
So I'm curious too. So when you're doing these visits to claimants, did you ever find yourself like in a neighborhood or an area that you were like, I don't know if I want to be here right now, like, or in a situation that you felt, unsafe?
Yes. Funny. And it shows what a good soldier I was back then, because I would not do this nowadays. I would just say, let me explain, I'll make it clearer. What we had to do with Liberty, I was working as a work comp senior adjuster. This was probably 3 or 4 years into my career. And there are certain individuals who get lifetime work comp benefits. And then in New York, they had a second injury fund where after a certain amount of time, you get reimbursed from the state. It was a fund that insurers would contribute to. But in order to get the reimbursement, you had to do what they called an alive and well check. other words, make sure the person's still alive, make sure they're not working. So I had to go into a really bad area of Brooklyn. I had to go in this bad area of Brooklyn. And I said to my supervisor, listen, do I have to wear a suit? Because I'm going to stand out like a sore thumb. And he said, oh, yeah, absolutely. We always wear suits. Nowadays, I would have just not asked, and I would have worn a shirt and jeans and gone in and blended in. But anyway, there I am with my little three-piece suit, my briefcase. I look like a narc. So I'm getting the neighborhood, everybody's looking at me. I get into the building, and the claimant was just a wonderful, wonderful man. Really nice man, probably in his 60s, retired from the Navy, had been working in a manufacturing plant, got really badly injured, and was just never able to work again. Really nice gentleman. And he had next to him a young man, I'd say in his early 20s. This guy had muscles in his teeth. I've never seen a guy so buff. You know, it was unbelievable. So I thought it was his son. So I'm talking and I'm getting the information I need. And I said, oh, is this your son? He goes, no, it's my bodyguard. I go, your bodyguard? He says, yeah, he's one of the neighborhood people. And he goes, and when I go out and so forth, he comes with me. And he says, and quite honestly, he goes, I didn't know what to expect with you coming to my house. So I asked him to come here. I said, no, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. You don't know who I am. He says, he's going to walk you to your car. And I said, well, you think that's necessary? He goes, I'm kind of surprised you made it here without an incident. I said, I mean, that's how bad this neighborhood was. So I said, okay, I'll have him walk me to the car. I won't turn that down. And he said, oh, make sure your car's locked. And I said, oh, I always lock my car when I park it. And he says, no. Even when you're driving, he goes, they'll pull you right out of the car. This was like way before carjacking was even known. Now, you know, you kind of hear about it. So that was a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
But I was lucky because honestly, Suffolk County, Long Island, there's a few bad, what we call bad neighborhoods, but nothing like in the city.
Mm-hmm.
But I had colleagues who were assaulted, beaten up, robbed. It can be dangerous when you're on the roads. You do have to kind of keep your wits about you.
Yeah, I remember, I mean, I think it's still present today. I mean, I remember going to visiting insured's homes and talking to them. And sometimes you don't know what you're walking into. And while they're all there, I never experienced anything that I felt unsafe once I was there, but you're going in, you're like, well, I don't know what I'm going into. I don't know this person. I don't know this neighborhood, you know, but you know, for me, it always worked. I didn't run into any bodyguards, at least not yet.
No, that was the only one. I have to be honest. And I was on the road probably about, 4 years, 3-4 years. Other than that instance, I never really had a situation where I felt unsafe. I did feel unsafe in that neighborhood, I have to be honest. I think the biggest thing I would run into occasionally would be dogs. Someone would have a German Shepherd or some type of dog that would be barking and you didn't want to get near. But I was kind of blessed when it came to that. I really didn't have too many incidents on the road.
So you worked as a road adjuster for how long, and then what did you move on to?
I was a road adjuster for a couple of years. Then I got promoted. Well, I guess it's more a lateral move. I was a court adjuster. So I was still on the road. And that was the best job I've ever had in the industry. My diary was basically the court calendar because Liberty had a lot of cases in court. And I had Supreme Riverhead, which was out in Eastern Long Island, and the county court in Hauppauge. And it was great. And it was helpful for me because when I had worked prior to being a court adjuster, I was always a little intimidated by attorneys. Oh, geez, I have all this plaintiff's attorney. You know, I mean, you know,
we're an intimidating
right
bunch.
now. I'm intimidated.
Yeah, look at me.
Yeah. So I was kind of intimidated. So when I went to the courthouse and saw these individuals on a daily basis, number one, I established a rapport with most of them, but I also realized, you know what, they're not any different than anybody else other than they have a law degree. And so it kind of helped me to deal with them. And then you also got some hints. I think I might have mentioned this to you when we spoke last week. Like, we knew of one attorney who had a gambling problem. And he'd go to the casinos on the weekend, and he would usually lose. On Monday morning, if you saw him in the hallway at the courthouse and you had some cases with him, you could go up to him and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I'd like to try to settle this case. And he would, oh, yeah, because he wanted money, because he had lost at the casinos over the weekend. So you could get cases settled with him fairly easily. And you also got to see them in action, because I'd go into courtrooms and watch them, the ones who were on trial or arguing a motion, and you could tell, wow, this attorney's really good. Or conversely, you'd say, this attorney's not all that sharp. On both sides, defense and plaintiff. You'd realize who the real strong attorneys were. So that was a great job. So I was on the road between that and my initial job about 4 years. And then I was promoted to a senior comp adjuster in Queens. And that was more of an indoor assignment. That was in 1984.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that about going to court and finding out what attorneys are good or bad, because I remember, very early in my career in Philly, we have what's called like discovery court, where it's all the discovery motions that are filed. And I remember going the very first time and being, very intimidated and very like worried about arguing my motion. I was like, everyone, I'm going to sound so stupid, and I'm fresh out of law school. I don't know what I'm talking about. And it didn't take longer than 5 or 10 minutes. And I was like, nope, I don't have anything to worry about. There's a lot of buffoons in here. Like, no one's listening to what I'm saying anyway. The judge probably isn't even listening to what I'm saying.
Yep. And I got to know the judges, and they knew I was not an attorney, but they worked with me because I would settle cases. And they were under a lot of pressure at that time. The docket in Suffolk County was so backlogged. I don't know why, but it was extremely backlogged. And so they were anxious to move cases. And I always tried to be reasonable, always tried to do what I could. And they got to know me that way. And so I'll tell you a real quick story. I had a case one time, we had a date certain for a trial, meaning no adjournments, no nothing. You're here and you try the case. Well, our insured was in the military. It's a young man in the military. It's a really bad case where he had been moving a scaffold and the plaintiff was on top of the scaffold, a very attractive young woman who was high school. And he moved it and she wasn't ready. She fell to the gym floor and suffered really serious internal injuries and fractures. So it was a real bad case, very competent plaintiff's attorney on the other side, and 2 co-defendants, the school, the scaffold manufacturer, and us, the individual. And he was in the military. He's on a secret mission. Nobody knew where he was, including his parents. So when we called to have him show up for court, his dad said, I don't know where he is. He could be a mile away. He could be halfway around the world. I don't know where he is. So I had to go into court. And I love this. The defense attorney, who is a staff counsel for Liberty, says, we're not going to try the case, so I'm not going to go. You go and tell the judge we need an adjournment. Yeah, thanks. So we go. And I call all the attorneys beforehand, the day before, to say, listen, I have to ask for an adjournment. The 2 co-defendants said, we're ready for trial. We're going to do what the judge says, but we won't oppose you. Plaintiff's attorney says, no way, I'm opposing it. Oh, great. I tell my defense counsel, you can handle it. So I go into the court. Right now, I'm before. This is the master judge who calls the calendar. He's like the top judge in Supreme Riverhead. A retired judge who they brought out of retirement to move these cases. And he was a no-nonsense guy, but I knew him. I settled a lot of cases with him. So I go in and I explain to him, they call the calendar and I go, application, meaning I want to apply for an adjournment. So he's like, this is a date certain. He goes, well, but let's talk about it. So we go in, now we have our conference. And I explain the situation. And he says, well, he goes, he's serving in our military. I want to give him every benefit. He goes to the 2 co-defendant attorneys, object. No, we're fine. He goes to the plaintiff's attorney, he goes, I do object. And he starts in on this long spiel. And in the middle of it, the judge cuts him off. And he says, who the hell do you think you are coming into this courtroom telling me how to run my courtroom This man settles cases with me every day. You're here once, because this attorney was from Nassau County.
Mhm.
You're here once a month, if that, and you're going to walk in here and tell us how to do our business. And the plaintiff's attorney's like, Brendan, he goes, well, he's not even an attorney. And he goes, I know. That's why I like him. And I'm sitting there, and the two co-defendant attorneys are going like, holy mackerel, what does this kid have? I mean, we can't get along. And I'll never forget it. And I was so grateful for the judge doing that for me, because he didn't have to. And I remember seeing him in the hallway later that day, and he gave me one of those friendly, like, you know, punch in the gut type thing. Like, yeah, we showed him, didn't we? I'll never forget that. And to this day, I've always been thankful for that judge, because he could have made life miserable for me. But it also showed me the importance of, if you work with people and try to cooperate and try to collaborate, when the chips are down, they'll have your back. And I think that's something people have to learn in my industry. You can't always be a hard nose. You got to compromise.
I couldn't agree with that more, because I feel like sometimes you encounter people who just want to fight just to fight over things that, you know, you have to pick your battles. What is this going, if you're going to dig your heels in the sand and, you know, fight over this discovery issue or whatever it may be, like, how is it really going to change things in the long run? You know, and is it really worth, you know, creating this tension where, you know, we probably can work out a compromise, or, you know, or does it really matter? You know, I think a lot of people talk about just pick your battles.
Yep.
And, you know, I've found, and I think you agree that, you know, when you work with your opposing counsel, you get a lot more done than if you're just up against them. Now, that's not to say that you're not, you know, advocating for your clients and working for their best interest, but their best interest is always in your mind, even if you're, you know, trying to work with counsel to get them the result that they need.
No, I agree. And it's funny, and to their credit, Liberty, I worked with Liberty for about 5 years, and I was in their home office in 1985. And which was kind of a quick rise to the home office. It usually took 8 to 10 years, and I made it in 4.5, 5 years. But they weren't paying a lot. And then Chubb approached me, and I went to work for Chubb as a litigation examiner in Boston, because Liberty's home office was in Boston. So I had moved to Boston in 1985. And that's where I really learned. Liberty was a really good training ground for being a road adjuster and resolving cases. And they gave you big cases. I had 1 year experience, and I was handling death cases and paralysis cases. So they let you cut your teeth. And so I'm always grateful for that. But they didn't really tell you much about reserving, which is a big part of what you do on the claim side. So when I went to Chubb, and they really hammered home the importance of reserving cases and evaluating cases, it was new to me. Even though I had 5 years in the business, it was like, wow, there's really a focus on this. And to both Liberty's credit and Chubb's credit, they let me do what I wanted to do with claims. And I believe in compromise. I wish there was more of it in the country these days, honestly. I think it's such a valuable tool to be able to sit down with somebody, and yeah, you can be a strong advocate for a position, but it doesn't mean you have to be, you know, immovable. And the other person can be a strong advocate, and it doesn't mean it has to get personal. It doesn't have to be vitriol. It's just, hey, you have a position, I have a position, let's talk about it. And one of the things I've always done from the very beginning, people say, when you evaluate a claim, I guess you sit down and you look at your strengths and weaknesses. I go, no, I look at the other side's strengths and weaknesses first, because that's what I'm going to have to counter. So I look at it from a plaintiff's point of view. If this were my case, what would I argue? What would I hope doesn't get brought up? And then that's how I adjust my strategy. And I think it helps, because it puts you in the other person's shoes.
Oh, yeah.
And I just, the thing I'm proudest of all the years I've been in claims, and granted on the brokerage side, which is where I am now, you don't get in the trenches as much, but I had very few cases go to trial. I was able to settle cases, and I was always proud of that because I think it was in the best interest of everybody. And, it saved you money. And there were some cases you have to try for whatever reason. There is no liability, or you just have someone on the other side who's just totally unreasonable. But that's pretty rare. Pretty rare you find a case like that. So I was on the insurance carrier side for about 18 years. I also worked in Chubb's home office for about 3 years, and again, saw some horrific cases, some really horrible bodily injury cases, a lot of coverage issues that came through, and I loved it. And went to the brokerage side about, gosh, when was that? I'm going to say it's about 21 years ago. Yeah, I've got about 19 years on the carrier side, about 21 on the brokerage side. And I went to work for Marsh. And it was an adjustment because on the insurance company side, even though the policyholder is your client and you want to do what's best for them, your ultimate allegiance is to the insurance company. You gotta be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, if there's a dispute where the policyholder wants to do something and the insurance carrier wants to do something else, most policies give the insurance company the right to settle or the right to make a decision on how a case is handled. And so that's what you do. When I went to the brokerage side, the focus shifts because I'm not an agent. An agent would be another arm of the insurance company. I'm a broker. With a broker. We represent the clients. And so I had to do that little 180 where now I've got to really fight for the client. And I enjoy that part of it too. And it's been a lot of fun. And I've had clients now for 20 years who I've gotten to really know. I know their business. I know their philosophies, and they're different. Some are, oh, we don't want anything to go to trial. Some are, no, we're not afraid of trial. We'll take it to the mat if we have to. And so you have to learn all of these different personalities. And now I'm dealing with all different insurance companies because they're not all with the same insurance carrier.
Right.
And those carriers have different philosophies and different service models. And so it was a little easier on the carrier side because your one master was really the company. And then you try to do what you could for your policyholders. Here, I got a lot of different masters, and none of them are my company. They're all, my company's edict is make the clients happy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So now you're in a true, client services role. But just like you said, when you've had clients for several years, you really get to know them and you really get to know what pushes their buttons, what makes them happy, what they're looking for, and you can truly serve the client and their best needs. And I think that's a wonderful relationship to have. And even though, you have to know all the players and how all the players kind of deal with things differently with the insurance companies and the clients and how they interact, once you have a handle on that client and what that client needs and what that client wants, I think it's easier to deal with the outlying players because and you can have honest conversations. Like you know that, okay, Joe from so-and-so company, he really wants to try cases, but he needs to be heard. I need to tell him like, okay, you can try it, but it's going to cost you, this much in your premium, and it's going to take this long, and whatever it may be. But how to have that conversation.
No, what you say is very important. And one of the things I pride myself on is being honest, straightforward, letting clients know when there are problems, hopefully also offering a solution when I'm telling them about the problem, saying, we have a problem here. Here's what it is, but here's how I think we can best solve it. And I think they really appreciate that because I don't think they always get that in their business dealings. And so I've had clients who are absolutely livid about a situation, ready, take no prisoners, want 15 people fired at the insurance company. And I'll say to them, the insurance company's right in this instance. And there's no better feeling than when a client looks at you and goes, I hate what they're doing, but if you're telling me it's the right thing to do, I'll do it. And that's when you know you've made that connection.
Mm-hmm. And that they trust your input and they trust your opinion,
Yeah.
and I think that I think that sort of thing happens not only over time, but with the honesty. If you're always straightforward and not just a yes person, that, I think being a yes person can get you in a lot of trouble.
Oh, it can.
If you're just saying yes to make someone happy, but you can't deliver on the yes, then it's probably not a good yes. You probably should have said no.
Yeah, because what we have to understand, all of us, attorneys, claim people, is we may not necessarily be reporting to the top person at our client. So they're reporting up the line. So if we say, oh yeah, well, we don't think they should try it, but he wants to try it. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'll try it. He's now going to go up the line and say, yeah, we're going to try this case, and it blows up. He or she is on the line.
Right.
And so I feel I owe it to them so that there are no surprises and they don't get themselves in a situation with their management where they put themselves in a corner. So I think honesty is really important. One time I had a client, I meeting him for the first time, and he was a tough nut. He had fired 2 other claim consultants. And so I'm sitting there and he says, you've probably heard about me. He goes, I fired 2 of your colleagues already. I said, yeah, I've heard of you, but I'm going to make my own decision. I'm not going to go back based on what they said or what happened in the past. It said, this is, a fresh start. So we talked and we realized that we had a lot of common ground. And he says, I think I'm going to like working with you. And he goes, I do want you to be honest with me. Just do it in private. Don't show me up in front of other people. That's what your colleagues did. He goes, you got something to say to me that I might not want to hear. I want you to do it privately. I said, that's common sense. Mm-hmm. And I said, and I'm really glad to hear that you're saying this, because otherwise I was going to get you a bobblehead doll. And you could just talk to it and hit it and it would go. And you wouldn't need me at all. And he laughed. He thought that was great. And when I told the producer, the person who places the program, you said that to Tony? Yeah, he thought it was great. He goes, oh my God. I think the guy had to go get a stiff drink after that. He thought I had blown his account totally. To this day, we're still very good friends. I still work on his account, and I have at least 2 or 3 clients who have retired, who I keep in touch with on a regular basis. That's the relationship we've developed.
Well, I mean, because you've developed friendships. It's not just, it's not just a working relationship. When you truly work together with someone, there's more than just work there. And I think that builds the strongest relationship. I mean, think about it. If you actually like the person, enjoy, working with them and talking to them, then, you're going to keep doing it and it's going to last.
Yeah. When I manage people, because again, we just get cases assigned to us and clients assigned to us. I used to say, listen, clients are like your family. You have no say in the matter. That's who you have. You better learn to love them. And learn to get along with them because they're yours. And that's, I think, the nice part of this job too, is you deal with people from all walks of life. I mean, I could be talking to a blue collar worker 1 minute, and the next minute I'm talking to, one of the most incredible medical professionals in the industry. It runs that whole gamut. So you really do have to learn how to connect with people on all levels. And I think that's part of the fun of the job. Honestly, I don't find it a challenge. I think if you're yourself, if you're genuine, if you're empathetic to somebody, if you listen to them, if you try to understand where they're coming from, really not that hard to get along with folks. As you said before, you can't have that scorched earth policy where I'm going to win.
Right. So, and I meant to ask you this earlier and I got a little sidetracked, but so when you're on the carrier side and then what made you switch over to the broker side? Was it an opportunity that just arose that you're like, I'm going to try do this, or you needed a change? Like, what made you shift?
You know what? It was not done out of choice. I was working for Zurich and I was there for about 2 years, and I met my current wife, and we will be celebrating 22 years of marriage in May.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. And she's just great. And she was on the underwriting side, and I met her, and we were dating and decided we were going to move in together and get married. And I think Zurich just didn't like that. So they laid me off because we worked in the same office.
Oh, okay.
Weird, because we weren't in the same department. Like, she didn't report to me. I didn't know that, but it was just kind of odd. So I get laid off. And I had a friend on the brokerage side who I had known for many years, who had worked at Chubb and other carriers. And he found out I got laid off, and he called me like a day later. He says, "Hey, I heard that you got laid off at Zurich." I go, "Wow, that traveled fast." He goes, "Oh, why don't you come work for us?" And he was at Marsh. So I said, "Well, I've never been on the brokerage side." He goes, "Come on in and let's talk." So I went in and talked, and they offered me the job on the spot.
Wow.
And being, I had just, and believe it or not, I just moved into our new home. My wife and I just moved into our new home. So I'm like, I need a job. So it's the same thing. Like, I started with the industry, brokerage thing a year or two, and then I'll get back to, 21 years later, I'm doing brokerage. So really, it was out of necessity, not out of any, catharsis.
Yeah, but it seems that it was like a good, sometimes things happen that at the time you feel that it's the end of the world, or, it's a disaster, and it makes you make a shift. And that shift usually has a really good end result. You just have to be able to adjust to the shift. And, for you, I mean, at the time, it probably was devastating. And you're probably like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then you were forced to shift, and now, look where you are. And I feel like you've had an even wider, more fruitful and interesting career because of that forced shift.
No, I agree, Megan. It really was a blessing in disguise. And you're right. When it happened, I'm like, oh my God, my wife's got to be thinking, what kind of loser am I getting with you?
She stuck with you.
Job, And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and where am I going to find another? And it's just amazing how it worked out. And when I look at what I've been able to do in the last 21 years, the places I've been, the clients I've met, the industries I've learned so much about, being more on the inside. I've learned more about healthcare. I've learned more about higher ed. I've learned more about manufacturing, learned more about construction that I wouldn't have learned on the carrier side, because I'm in the inner circle now with some of these clients, with most of my clients. And so it really has been rewarding. But I'll tell you something, if God forbid the brokerage said, hey, we're suspending claims, and I had to go back to work for an insurer, I'd have no problem with that. I really wouldn't. I really have enjoyed my career. The claims world has been good to me in many, many ways. And I like to think that I've been good to it, and that I've done my job with integrity, that I've represented the industry well. So I think it's been a win-win.
Now, do you have a particular preference as to types of industry that you enjoy working with the most, or because I know there's certain claims that you're like, oh, I just love these types of cases. Do you have a preference?
I enjoy liability cases more than like work comp or property. I don't do at all. That's one area I'm really not well versed in at all, is first party property losses. But on the casualty side, between liability and work comp, I do prefer liability. I find construction cases to be very interesting. They usually can involve, well, I shouldn't say usually, they can often involve very serious injuries and very interesting contractual issues. And so I do like working on those. But honestly, whether it's hospitality, higher ed, healthcare, I'm a generalist, but I have a lot of knowledge in construction and healthcare. I love them all. I do med mal cases as well. And those two are extremely interesting.
And scary, though. I feel like anytime I read like a med mal opinion, I'm always like, oh, I'm a little nervous now that these things happen.
Yeah, and I'm based in Connecticut, and the verdicts here on med mal are going through the roof.
Really?
Oh my goodness. It's one of those things, you can win a case, and if you win, great. But if you lose, you are probably going to lose big. And the further problem we have in Connecticut right now is we have a very liberal appeals court. Not so much the first level of appeals court, the Supreme, the final, extremely liberal. So you're not going to get relief. If you lose on the trial level, you're probably not going to see that reversed on appeal.
Okay.
Sometimes that's your out. You say, oh, well, we got hammered on the trial level, but we've got some appellate issues. Very, very difficult in Connecticut.
Wow, that's interesting. And also, I mean, it just drives up the plaintiff's bar even more because they know that like they can get this huge verdict and they're going to get the huge verdict. Like and they can always use it over, counsel's head to settle because they have all these.
Yeah. And
that's a challenge.
there's one firm here, I won't mention the name, but they specialize in med mal. And I've heard that roughly 70 to 80% of their cases are referrals from other plaintiffs' attorneys. So what's happening is injured people, they see the guy on TV, call me, I'll win your case. And the other thing, the guy doesn't even know where the courthouse is, but because I know these attorneys, they're like, oh, God. But, they'll go to them and those attorneys realize, wow, this is well beyond my scope of expertise. I can do a slip and fall, or I can do an auto case. I'm not a med mal plaintiff's attorney, but they have no problem referring it to this firm because they know the verdict potential is so high and the settlements are going to be so high. Even a small percentage of that is going to be very lucrative for them.
And they don't have to do any of the work. They just
exactly.
wait.
Exactly. And so you look and when you see it, you go, oh my, when you see the firm that's really capable, you go, oh my gosh, this is going to be costly. And you're right. They're emboldened by the fact that they know the jury pools here. Connecticut's kind of a funny state. Like the west corner of the state is very conservative. So if you have a med mal case up there, you probably have a chance of getting a moderate verdict. But if you go to the southeast corner of the state, New London County, they call it Candyland. Just, the dollars are flowing, man. It's whatever you want, you got it. And then in the middle of the state is somewhere in between, but tends to be more liberal than conservative, like a Fairfield County, New Haven County, Hartford County. There you have a chance to win outright because the jury pool is so mixed. You can get some very sophisticated jurors on there, but it's a roll of the dice. And so that's where you really rely on your defense attorney to say, hey, I'm really happy with the jury I got, or no, I'm not that happy with the jury I got. And that's where you really need a good defense attorney because that jury is going to make all the difference in the world. And there's some really fine defense attorneys here in Connecticut who specialize in med mal. And I have a lot of healthcare clients here. And in fact, one client, I am part of their claim committee, their internal claim committee, outsider. And so they'll have the head of the head of the ER, the chief of medicine, the general counsel, the risk manager, but they want that outside opinion, somebody who's not a medical professional, who's a layperson, who would be on a jury. And I look at it as a layperson and say, well, if I was on a jury, I'd want to know this, or I'd want to know that, or I wouldn't be happy with what you did there. And that helps them to evaluate their exposure as well. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that one firm that's like the big player, because I do think, the opposing counsel does play in a lot to, how you truly evaluate a case, because you have to look at it and see what time are they going to spend to really build up their case. And if you're dealing with one of those types of firms that that they're gonna spend the money, so boho firm that's on the TV or has a billboard or whatever may not spend the money to get the economics expert or any expert for that matter.
Yeah, it's true.
But and I hate to say you do have to put a bunch of stock in who you're going up against, but you do, and especially in certain venues, and you just if you're in a liberal venue like for us, Philadelphia is an extremely liberal venue, and if you have a heavy hitter and bad injuries and a a liberal venue, you're going to be looking at dollars. So you need to be prepared for that. I mean, it's not like, unlike you're saying in the, the southeast corner, Candyland, Philly can be like
Yeah.
Candyland too. So, what advice would you give to, someone just starting out either in claims or just, graduating college, has no idea what to do to them for themselves. You've kind of seen it all. You've been there, you've done it, you're still doing it. What advice would you give to the younger Rick?
Okay. And that was me when I came out of college. I had no clue what I was going to do. What I would say to folks is look at any opportunity with an open mind. Even if it's not exactly what you want, give it a chance. And with respect to claims, here's what I like about it. And it may not be for everybody, but this is what I would say to somebody and why they should give it a try. You're going to be involved in just about every aspect of life that there is. You need to know a little bit about the law. You need to know a little bit about medicine, engineering, construction, sociology, psychology. I mean, you name it, you're dealing with all different personalities, all different industries. And if you're lucky and you do it long enough, you'll get to learn quite a bit about all of those disciplines. And it may even lead, you do claims for 4 or 5 years and you say, I really love the law. Well, it's never too late. Go to law school, become an attorney. Or you might say, gee, I had one of my people who worked for me do this. She really became involved in medicine, the medical aspects of claims. She went to college and got a nursing degree, became a nurse.
Yeah.
And you'll meet people from all different walks of life. So if a client really takes a liking to you, they might say, hey, listen, we'd like you to come work for us in our risk management department or in our finance department. It can, and some of these are, these are Fortune 500 companies that we're working with. I have some clients that would be very familiar to folks and they go, oh, wow. And so you make contacts and you get to travel. Because I have clients all over the country. You have cases that occur all over the country, all over the world. When I was with Chubb, I handled cases internationally, much less litigious here in the US, much less. But again, you learned about how their judicial systems work, how their cultures work. Like for instance, in Japan, here we get a lawsuit to say, oh yeah, another lawsuit. That's a big deal in Japan. And I learned that you can't just go in there and say, well, let's do that. It is a very slow process because it's almost a personal affront to sue somebody, and it's taken very seriously. And so I learned that when I was dealing with cases in Japan that you can't have not that you have a cavalier attitude here, but here it's sort of like business as usual. We'll just get rid of it. There you have to go through a very slow process. And it may have changed now because it's been a while since I did this. But it was taken seriously by all involved. And that would probably slow the process down a little, but it was a very civil process as well. So you get to learn about different people all over the country. And I think you learn a lot about yourself. And to me, what I learned is the power of being able to compromise, and it's carried over into my personal life. Like any married couple, my wife and I have arguments, but then, we learn that, hey, it's not going to serve anybody any good to stay mad. So let's work it out. Let's compromise. And I think my job has helped me with that because, when I started, I knew it all. I knew everything when I started out. All these older people, they don't know what the hell they're doing. I'll show them how to do it right. And so I kind of, I got slapped around a little bit. You learn, you make some mistakes. You have some cases that blow up in your face. And they usually blew up in your face because you were too rigid, because you wouldn't, give in, or you wouldn't look at the other person's perspective and you say, oh no. And more times, those are the ones that blow up in your face. But it's a valuable lesson. It's a good lesson. All industries have their bad apples, everyone. The medical profession has bad apples. believe me, I've seen it firsthand. And that's a very, and rightly so, a very well-respected profession. You know, these people are amazing, especially nurses. Nurses are the most underrated people in the world. When I see the stuff they do in hospitals and clinics and for patients. But like any profession, you have a small group, thankfully, that just, they're not good at what they do, or they're not ethical, or they are apathetic. But to paint a whole industry or a whole vocation with that brush is unfair.
Right.
And I find, and people may think this is Pollyanna, 97% of the people I deal with are great. They're great. I love working with them. And the other few, you do what you have to do to manage the situation, and then just get yourself away from them. Don't get dragged into whatever they're doing. But sometimes you do have to deal with people who you may not like, or who may not be as ethical as you'd like, but you still have to learn how to work with them and just keep your contacts to them to a minimum.
And I think that's just such great advice, and advice to anybody, if you're early in your career, late in your career, done with your career, it's just good life advice. So, just to wrap things up, I need to ask, so if you could do it all over again, would you do it again? Was this the same, if you had the option of, being claims for, your entire career, or, coaching a professional football team, is this still what you would choose?
I would.
Good.
I would. I'm not going to lie. If somebody said, well, you could work, because I love football. Sports I've kind of soured on. It's just, but I love NFL football. Love it. And so if somebody said, you could work for the NFL Network talking about football all year, and we'll pay you $3 million a year to do it, I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
But all things being equal, I would do this again. And I would even go this far. If down the road, in another world somewhere, somebody says, you can go back and relive all of those years, good and bad. You can't change them, but you can actually replay them and go, I'd sign up for that in a minute. That's how much I've enjoyed the 40 years I've been doing this.
I love that.
Yeah.
You even made me tear up a little bit. I think that's just, and I think it's amazing to say, and just such a positive way to look back on your career. And I hope that, myself and anyone I know can sit where you are and sometimes have the same sentiments looking back on your career path, because that's just awesome.
Yeah, I hope so. Because work is such an important part of our lives, and it's such a big part of our lives. We spend so much time doing it. You really need to enjoy it. And that would be the other advice I'd give to younger people, whether they're trying claims or law, medicine, or whatever it might be. If early on you just don't have the passion for it, and you just don't do something just for the money. Just don't do something because it's expected. Like, you'll have these families that are legacy police officers, legacy attorneys, legacy doctors. It's okay to be the one that says, and you see a lot on these my wife watches cooking shows, so I watch cooking shows. And you'll see someone who says, I was in corporate America and I gave it up and I became a chef and I'm making 20% of what I made, but I'm happy. Or my family wanted me to be a doctor. I went to culinary school and they're disappointed, but I'm happy. Be happy. That to me is if you can get up every day, and not every day, some days I get up and go, boy, I wish I could go to the beach today instead. But if 80, 90% of the time you get up and you go, I'm kind of looking forward to work today, and it's going to be fun. Boy, you are very, very fortunate. So I wish that for everybody. I really do. Whatever field they choose.
Well, that's awesome. And, a great way to close it out, because I love it. So, Rick, thanks so much for coming on. I think I could probably talk to you for another hour and a half.
Likewise. It's been a real pleasure, Megan, and I can't thank you enough for asking me to do this. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, thanks so much.